All right, so my name's Dan Wilson. I work for Action Air Systems. We're an HVAC company out of Manchester, Connecticut. I'm the drafter, MEP coordinator, and my background before that was I spent 5 years with the company installing ductwork and HVAC systems, and before that went to school for drafting. So full circle.
So you're really on the construction post-design end of things. When exactly do you become involved in a project?
Yeah, so I become involved on a project about 3 to 4 months before boots are on the ground. Um, so on these institutional jobs or large commercial jobs, mostly we do government jobs basically. So schools are funded by government grants. So it's government job. So they go through a process. So they the town puts out to bid to architectural firms, and all these different architectural firms come up with concepts for the renovation, and pricing, and the town picks the firm they like, and then that firm goes ahead. They work with engineers to finish it up, and then send it out to bid to a general contractor. And that general contractor is going to be responsible for the entire duration of the project from there on out. Constructing it, scheduling it, phasing, if students need to be displaced during the construction, how we're going to make that work without having the kids out of school.
Not a problem right now.
Not a problem right now. As everyone else is finding themselves out of work or out of school, we are ramping up, taking advantage of it while we can. And then once the general contractor is decided, they create the phasing schedules, get it approved by the owner, the town, what have you, and then they put it out to bid to subcontractors. So they're asking for bids from carpenters, masons, HVAC, plumbing, electrical, cabinetry, furniture, every aspect of the building has a different contractor that does it. So they put it out to bid to us, we go in, we price it out, we send in our bids, and if we are the low bidder, we're selected. Then after the contract is signed, I immediately get the drawings, and that's when I start.
So, name, Ron Gooden. I am the healthcare principal here at Phase Zero Design. Been in the business for farther and longer than I care to remember. Let's see, I graduated college, Syracuse in 89, 90. So a while ago. I have had multiple roles. I started in some big name architectural firms initially, realized that I wasn't learning a heck of a lot, and started working at some other firms to kind of get my first true mentors. After quite a few years, I actually started working within a hospital in a healthcare network, 2 hospitals and multiple other buildings, and saw the owner side of the table then, which was kind of cool. Great experience. I actually then worked for CM and owner's rep for about 3 to 5 years, so I saw that side of the table as well. So I've literally seen all 3 sides of the construction table, including the owner's rep, which is kind of that CM style kind of construction management side that you're talking about as far as group.
So being that you're on the architecture side of things, you probably get involved in the project pretty close to right when it starts. How do you come across these jobs, and what are your first steps in that process?
So the biggest thing to really determine if that's something that you want to kind of head towards and help in is determining how you want to do that process. And I feel very, very strongly that the best method is more of a relationship-based sales approach than a commodity-based sales approach. in a commodity-based sales approach, I'll use a bad example, but car salesmen come up to you, they'll say, what do you need? Here it is, here's the cost, and you negotiate. And everybody uses that analysis usually in a detrimental fashion because nobody really likes that process. In any service-based kind of industry, the kind of sales process, the relationship-based sales process is all about what it says is building a relationship and a network with a group of people that you almost build the champion inside of that hospital or that whatever the facility is, and get to a point where they are coming to you with questions, they are coming to you with opportunities, and they're coming to you with often problems, because in the end, really the design process or the service industry in general is really about making your client and his life easier and better, and honestly making them look better to their boss. If you can provide a service, a product, whatever to your client, and everybody likes it, and he's seen as the guy that brought you in, you've just made his life a heck of a lot easier, and you've built a champion who, when the next project comes along, remembers you and says, oh yeah, Ron, he helped me a lot, we got through that project. It was, we actually laughed a little bit, because I feel like you need to laugh during this process. And you actually maybe learn together and work together as a team, instead of doing that pointing kind of thing. So I always try to work with people I know, who I trust, who I know will have my back because I'm going to have their back. We'll give them leads even if it doesn't mean something for me, but it's more about how you can help others, and in return I believe in good mojo, they're going to turn around and help you. But it's really just keeping your finger on everything, talking to people. It's amazing how much time it can really take to develop that network.
So I'm Nicholas Fucci. I work at Phase Zero Design as a project coordinator, which is kind of like a mini version of an architect. Kind of not there yet, but I know enough to be helpful, essentially.
So Ron just told me about how he brings work into the office, and that's about where you come in the design process. So what are your first steps in that respect?
So Ron is like a really big idea guy, so he's really great at going out there and getting the work and bringing it back to the office, and then he pretty much throws it in my direction or someone at my level. And we sit down with him and kind of digest what the client was talking about, the kind of things that they want out of it, but also the client's not thinking about stuff like code and different kind of requirements in that regard. So there's a lot of early dialogue about the design that they want and the design that kind of like they can actually get, sort of thing. So usually what Ron and I actually do is we'll run through 3 or 4 design options, and I'll sometimes, this is hand drafting, sometimes it's in Revit or AutoCAD or something like that. He'll kind of guide me in different programmatic elements that need to be involved. We'll kind of slap together this really pretty looking floor plan, or sometimes we'll do a rendering or something like that. Sometimes we'll give them just one option, and then we'll kind of work with them on that one option. Sometimes we'll give them 3 different options, and they can kind of tell us the different things that they liked about each one, and then we kind of like mold that into one big project. But Ron is involved the whole way through, and he's like the connection to the client through the whole process. Whereas I'm more just like technology driven, production driven, trying to get the stuff that Ron needs from the computer into this guy's hands, whether it's a PDF or it's a model or something like that.
So at this phase, it seems like it's a lot of back and forth with the client and really determining what the needs of that user group is.
Right, and it's difficult because you can't always assume that it's the same from a previous client. Like I've worked on multiple pediatric centers, but the end result and the things that the client needed were totally different. So while you kind of have this vast reservoir of knowledge, you know, whether my own or if it's Ron's, you have to keep that relationship with the client kind of to the forefront, because every conversation you'll have with them will be different from the conversation you'll have with anyone else.
My name is Matt House. I'm currently a senior designer at Electric Boat General Dynamics. I design submarines, specifically piping systems within the boat, which is about 90% of the construction of the boat. So there's a chain of how things trickle down. First, there's a conceptual design, which is just purely a concept, and then it trickles down to basic design, which is where they design the hull, they design some internal structures and things like that, and then it becomes a mechanical thing. And then you have to design these mechanical items around the physical design of the boat itself. So it gets rather complex. There's a lot of different, how should I put this? We'll say trades, different trades, okay? Because there's HVAC, there is fire protection, there is plumbing, there is also, you know, things that you won't ever see in a building, which is hydraulics, you know, stuff, normal stuff that you could possibly think of that would be on a submarine. They're all in there. So the amount of coordination that happens at Electric Boat is far above and beyond what you would see in a building, such as, you know, like a school or any kind of commercial building or anything of that nature. So it's a lot more intense. There's a lot more waiting for people to finish up what they're trying to do, and so you can carry on with what you're trying to do. So yeah, it ends up being time consuming, to say the least. But back in when I was doing MEP work, it was much simpler because you only had to deal with X amount of trades, and you always knew what those trades were. Because there was HVAC guys, there were, you know, guys that did plumbing, there were guys that did piping, and piping includes whether it's drain water or if it's say if it's in a laboratory kind of thing, it's all of that combined in with all of the other trades combined. It gets complicated at that point if you're talking about a lab, but if it's a regular commercial building, it's not so bad.
So I think that right now I'm working on Bristol Hospital, which is a huge project, and it's kind of a good example of what I think is a good process, which was that we were working with a client that we worked with before, so we kind of knew the things they would like and dislike, so we were able to kind of burn through the design process a little bit faster, which made the client happy, because then he was able to see some kind of three-dimensional thing that he can kind of embrace and give feedback on and get involved with. But because we had such a good relationship with that client, we brought our mechanical and structural and actually the CM in super early. Bismarck Construction has been involved with the project since probably late schematic design, if not early design development, the whole way along, every 50%. So you have your schematic design phase, design development phase, and then construction document phase. And what we did with Bristol Hospital with the CM, we every 50%, 50% way through SD, 50% your way through DD, 50% way through CDs, we would send it to them, they would price it out, and they would give us feedback and say, you guys are way over budget, or you're doing okay, you can add that extra floor that you wanted to add, or which we did, and then we couldn't do it because the finances changed. So, being an architect is kind of fun and exciting because you're kind of maestroing all of these different groups of people and kind of figuring out, who needs what information and when this person should come in. So, Bristol Hospital was just like a great example of that, which they should check out at some point.
Bringing the CM and all of these other consultants in, as you said, a little early on this project, do you think that's been beneficial for the overall? I'm sure it causes some interesting problems and opportunities along the way.
Definitely, and especially with the CM, because bringing in your mechanical and your structural engineers on early is important for their feedback, but they're kind of more narrow focused than architects are, so they're worried about their stuff, you know, and that's fine. The CM is like an architect, kind of big picture, so they're really valuable for us in just looking at the drawings and getting feedback from them about things that need to change, mostly because, you know, I've been working on this project for 3 months or 6 months or something crazy like that, and when you look at the same thing for hours and hours and hours, you don't even see the mistakes. So when you get a CM who is looking at the big picture, he's looking at the money, he's looking at the client, he's looking at everything, and then he's looking at your drawings and he's saying, you know, this is very strange, I don't know why you did this, and then, you know, I'm kind of like, oh, well, I'm just dumb, it's fine, you know, I've just been looking at this too long. So bringing the CM in, especially for big projects, as early as you can, is definitely one of the most helpful things you would do, I would say.
So when you're actually trying to design something, you have to pay very close attention to where you are spatially with other trades, and you have to coordinate with them. It takes a lot of communication, and planning. Planning is a huge deal, you know.
Why is it important to have these other designers and engineers involved in the process?
So kind of like I was mentioning, architects being the maestro of all these people, it's something that I don't always agree with, because architects used to be this like fantastic jack of all trades kind of person who would be able to design a building and then engineer it to be able to stand, and then, you know, pick all of the finishes and the stone they were using and where they were getting it from. But nowadays, it's just more or less, you know, the architect is managing all of these different people and not getting into those details, because there's just so much knowledge that we just can't. Which is why we have consultants and engineers and stuff like that, and even Phase Zero Design has interior designers, which is not something that I'm familiar working with. Interior design is such a wide range of different problems that for an architect to take that on while also taking on architectural problems is very difficult. But I think another better example would be our structural engineers have actually hired a third-party company to do the detailing of all of the steel connections, which seems kind of silly because the structural engineers, you know, you would think that they would probably be doing that kind of stuff, but they are tackling the much bigger picture of how this building is going to stand. You know, they're figuring out the columns and the beams and the moment and all of the loads that go on, and also all of the really interesting demands, especially with Bristol Hospital. There's scanners, PET CT scanner machines that weigh thousands and thousands of pounds. So in order to focus their efforts on, you know, the big picture stuff, they consulted out to a smaller company that details all of the steel connections and kind of the very detailed, ornate pieces that necessarily, they are very important, but they're kind of standard. So you can kind of have someone else do it and be comfortable that it's not going to impact your kind of overall aesthetic or your concept or your big picture. They're just kind of helping you, which is what we need.
So it's really this whole intricate web of people involved in a construction process, and if you need another limb on the body, you go and hire another limb.
Right, or even you know, call up a rep from a manufacturer. Whenever I pick lighting, I don't ever really pick lighting. I call up my great friend Liza, who works for Illuminate, and I say, hey Liza, I need, you know, a 6-inch can light, but it's in a shower. You know, like, can you just throw me a cut sheet or a spec sheet for a light that I can put in there? And she does it, and she sends it to me, and that was, you know, 30 minutes of Googling that I didn't have to do. So, you know, I have one of those people for so many different things, you know, storefronts, windows, couches, you know, everything. So people like that make my job way easier. Which, if I had to pick that stuff, I can't even imagine the time and the headache. I would need 30 people under me just to get it all in.
So I'm Brett Gagne, and I own a Tri-State Contracting, a general contracting / HVAC company. We pretty much started out as a small construction company and started growing, and we get general contractors to complete the jobs that we started. Obviously, we're in the process of growing ourselves as everybody else. I started as just a bottom of the totem pole construction worker, and I started running work as a foreman. Saw that I had a knack for organizing and like putting people together in the right spot, building a team, as I would say. So basically, I'm on a bid list, bid.net or other bid lists. We can call general contractors, get on their bid list, and they email me these plans, and I have to go through them. So basically, I meet after I get these plans, and I meet with a MEP coordinator, and we just go over and I get some advice on help as far as like what we should change and what they see for problems. I can pick out most of the stuff myself in general, just because I've been in the field, I've worked in the field, and then we go out from there. They're going to catch some of the very small details that I might miss. So we all work together in a general sense to get the best bid in. Obviously, we have to be low bid, so which is hard in our field because there might be 15, 20 people bidding on one job, maybe even more at sometimes, and some guys are going to be really high on their bid list, some people are going to be really low. So then when it comes down to bidding time, we all sit down at a table, the bid goes out, and everybody's sitting there with their folder, hoping you got that bid right, because there's so many intricate stuff that goes into actually bidding a job. So we put a lot of time into bidding our jobs, because if I bid the job too low, I'm out of money. I mean, we can fold up in one job. I mean, we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars on some jobs, if not more. And it'll fold the job. So basically, we have to look at every aspect of that job before we bid it. And as soon as we sign that contract that we own that job, the only way you're going to get out of it is change orders. And I know there's ways to do it, but it's not the legal way to do it. It's really not the right way to do it. You need to be good. You need to have good backing and good guys around you to look at these prints and drawings and make sure that there's no chases or issues within the drawing that you missed.
So your reputation really ends up playing a big role in all this, doesn't it?
Reputation is everything. Most of my stuff, if we perform, we do a good job, we can even bid a little bit higher and still win those bids. Just because they know we're going to do the right job, we're going to bring that job to a close on time, schedule, and clean house as far as getting everything done efficiently and respectfully.
So I basically take the drawings that we get upon winning the job, take the bid, win the job, and then I take the drawings that the engineer and the architect came up with and turn them into a HVAC system that can actually be installed and fit within the building.
Isn't that the engineer's job?
No, so the engineer really comes up with, creates the system to hit all the specs that they need for the building. So the engineer is making sure that they have the proper amount of fresh air, and they're meeting acoustical requirements for the high performance energy codes in the schools that we do and stuff like that. but because different consultants for each trade all work together to create those designs, they don't necessarily fit, and they don't necessarily always know the way that it gets installed in the building in real world. So there's always a discrepancy. So it's our job to take their drawings, turn them into something that the guys in the field can actually install.
How do you know how it works real world?
Yeah, so I started, well, I didn't start as an installer, but I spent 5 years as an installer, in putting the ductwork and these systems in the buildings. Mostly, our company deals mostly with school renovations, hospitals, stuff like that. So heavy commercial, institutional, industrial. So I was able to learn how it actually gets installed, and then I take that experience and I turn that into a digital model so that the guys in the field don't have to go through the problems that I may or may not have experienced in the past.
So basically, our job is to build relationships with the higher ups so we can get the jobs. But if I can't get the jobs, I can't get the workers. So in return, I have to get the jobs and then obviously work with my guys to want to work with us. So we have to actually bring both sides of the field together as a medium and put everybody to work, and hopefully everybody works together. There's some jobs where it doesn't work out as good as you want it to, but you got to make ends meet between both contractor and higher ups so that you actually get these guys to work together and work in conjunction. And realistically, if the GC is supplying a good run job, everybody seems to be happy. Everybody goes home at 3:30. We're not working 10 to 12-hour days. That's huge, you know, keeping on schedule and not having rush schedules where everything's just put into perspective is where it needs to be. So
Yeah, and those rush jobs, they just end up riddled with mistakes and just causes everyone more money.
no one in these rush jobs are performing to their 100% because we're overworked. Underpaid at that point, and we're all looking for the way out to go see our families, kids, whatever you have it, and it really turns out to be a disaster in the end. So our job is to make everything run smoothly, make everybody happy, and make sure 8 hours a day is all you have to work.
So the biggest thing everybody has to realize is that when they get involved into the construction side of things is that you have to be a team player. You have to understand that there's multiple trades on site. Everything's happening all at once. So you have to be able to coordinate things. And it's not an easy thing to do, especially when there's a deadline involved and there's money involved. So everybody's looking at the bottom line all the time. You know, money is a big driver in schedule, unfortunately.
For sure.
You know. So.
And how do you guys communicate, I guess, what parts are going, like, how do you communicate the schedule and who's responsible for getting what done on time?
So what happens is that there is a certain amount of time allotted for certain designs, and you know, they try to divvy it up depending on how complex the system really is, and it's not an easy thing to put a number on, honestly, because you can run into all sorts of different issues such as conflicts with other trades, things like that. It happens very often, more times than I care to mention. But you have to deal with it and you have to make the best out of it.
So basically, we have meetings once a week on a long-term job. So we're making sure that the building's on schedule. We're meeting with the owner. We're meeting with any of the contractors, foremen, or owners of the companies that we have hired to see if anybody has any problems or speculations that we could maybe figure out before we hit a problem. Because all our job is to really do is to make sure that there's no hiccups in the process, and make sure that everybody's working together, equally, and we're not taking advantage of one contractor rather than the other. So those meetings are really set in place so that they can voice their opinions and I can voice my opinions on how everything's going. Sometimes it comes down to, hey, somebody's lacking and it's making another person not be able to do their job. That comes huge. And then now these two companies are fighting against each other, trying to make their own jobs go smoothly, whereas all we got to do is just push one contractor along or help them out, get their job done in a certain sense. I guess as far as meetings go, that's really what we're there to do is try to make sure that everybody knows what page everybody's on, and making sure that everybody knows exactly if there is going to be a snag in the process, we can have it figured out before we get there.
Jumping back to how you were talking about hand drafting, do you find that comes up in a lot of your meetings on site? If the GM or GC is stuck on an issue, do you just like bust out the paper and draw out exactly what he needs to do?
Yeah, something I've actually, we're just working on this Bristol Hospital project now, and something I'm encouraging a lot of is actually casting perspectives into the construction documents. So with Revit, you're able to spit out a pretty nice little simple rendering that you can attach minimal materials to, or even cast shadows on. And especially when you have a design, that one is pretty organic. There's a lot of curves to it, and the interesting and maybe difficult soffits to really portray in section and elevation and plan and reflected ceiling. So if you can, put a little vignette in the corner of the page of each of those kind of difficult situations, I think it really helps the folks that are out there on the site that are trying to interpret our drawings. So one, it makes them a lot easier and happier because I think it's going to reduce on RFIs. I think it's going to reduce on cost overruns because they can look at that saying, oh, that's what it's going to look like when I'm done. They didn't forget a soffit or forget something up there. But certainly in the field, we're drawing on the wall all the time. I try not to do it with the big black magic marker, but certainly a pencil, because you can cover that with, Kills or, some sort of paint, and it won't bleed through. But we're drawing all the time in the field because, especially in healthcare, the art of the field survey is really difficult. If you're going into an empty building or building from new, you can really have a good feeling of what the existing conditions are. In a hospital, especially in an occupied space, if you're going into an ICU or an OR, you can only, at best take pictures, and you can't even really do that of a patient. There's HIPAA rules, you can't take pictures of patients. So you have to be careful how to do that. You have to be careful how to get field survey dimensions, and to look above a ceiling in an active suite creates an awful lot of dust and stuff that can have infection control issues. So really, you're taking existing drawings, you're walking around, you're verifying there's a door there, you're saying that looks pretty close, that looks pretty good, maybe shooting a couple lasers for overalls. But a lot of it, we don't even call it design build, we call it kind of flash design, kind of in situ. You're going out to weekly job meetings and saying, hey, we just discovered this huge duct above the ceiling. Hopefully the facility folks know about it, or you're able to peek above, farther or out in the hallway and you can see it. So we do our best to mitigate that, but we're often doing hand sketching and throwing sketches on the drawings all the time like that.
Interesting.
just to figure it out.
So I believe your Bristol Hospital project is about to go out to bid next week. How do you get it to a point where it is ready to go out to bid, and what is that process like?
This is the most frustrating part as an architect because the project is absolutely never done. And again, Bristol Hospital is such a great example of that because we were supposed to send out a 100% construction document set to our CM Bismarck, and they were going to price it again and start sending it out to their subs and all of that. But we kind of were like, this isn't really 100%, it's more like 95%, but they're gonna take it and run with it anyway, which is really great. They've been pricing all along, so to say, you know, this is the official bid set, you can send this out to be bid by your subcontractors. There's gotta be some communication between the architect and the CM to be like, yes, this is the official 100% bid set that we're handing you, but there's a lot of kind of little stuff that we're going to follow up on, and you know, if there's like some big ticket items that would be like a big cost item that's not in the drawings yet, you know, we try and tell them that just to give them a heads up, then they can tell their sub and they can carry, you know, an allowance or something for that item. We've had situations where we have an existing roof that we're not sure if we can afford to pull everything up and re-roof it, so you know, in our drawings, we just say, existing roof to remain, but we might replace it, you know, and that's in the bid drawings, and the CM, they'll take that and they'll do their best, you know, they pull a number if the roof is remaining, if it's to remain, they'll run a number with it like that, and then they'll run an additional number that says, if we pull everything off, you know, it's gonna cost this much. And then when we get there, we say, it's going to cost this much, do you want to do it? And that's so to, you know, it's not like you don't hit send and there's like this big breath of relief. You know, it's kind of, you hit send and then you start working on the rest of the stuff. So the bid process, I don't want anyone to get this notion in their head that the bid process is like this like final say moment, you know, it's very much just a milestone and then you keep working, basically.
So when would you say, as bizarre of a answer I'm sure it will be, does the project actually end?
Oh, never. No, yeah, 30 years later when you get sued for something that fell apart. No, when is the project actually completed? For me at least, I would say when you are able to get in there and do a punch list, and a punch list is when you know, the contractor is done reviewing stuff, or installing stuff, the architect will come in and do a punch list, which is just reviewing kind of the surroundings and making sure that everything was installed based on the drawings. And I say that because if something is done and it looks like crap, but it was in the drawings, guess what the client just bought? They just bought some crap. So once you tie all those little loose ends and the client is happy, the architect's happy, the contractor's happy, then the project's done, theoretically.